Well, I didn't think I'd be making this video, but here we are, doing a follow-up to the 7 locomotives that need to be made in ready-to-run format. So today we have 7 more locomotives that I think need to be made in ready-to-run format. Now, the rules have changed slightly this time around, as most of these locomotives were made in multiples. In other words, there were numerous within that same class. These aren't all these specific prototype once-off locomotives that were in the previous list. Although that doesn't make sense anyways, because the G16 was made in multiples. So anyways, the rules don't matter. Basically, we've got 7 more locomotives that need to be made in ready-to-run format. And this time round, I've taken your suggestions and put them into this list. And I'm really, really grateful, because there have been some absolutely fantastic locomotives that I didn't even know existed. So without further ado, let's get straight into this list. Oh, by the way, if you're watching for the first time, my name's Hilton and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Welcome. We're gonna kick this list off with the London South West Railways, or Southern Railways, T14 class. They're also known quite affectionately as the Paddleboxes. Let's take a look. The London South West or Southern Railways T14 class, known as Paddleboxes for their distinctive splashes over the driving wheels, were express passenger locomotives designed by Dougal Drummond for the London South West Railways in 1911. With their 460 wheel arrangement, large driving wheels, and spacious boiler, they aimed to combine speed and power for key passenger routes. Their striking, bulky look, shaped by the prominent splashes, made them stand out, but also earned them their nickname. Despite their ambitions, the T14s underperformed. Their boilers struggled to maintain steam pressure at high speeds, and their ride quality left much to be desired. The arrival of Robert Urie's more advanced H15 and N15 classes soon pushed the T14s into secondary roles. After limited service under the Southern Railway, they were retired by the 1940s with none preserved. Though not a great success, the T14s are remembered for their bold design and as a stepping stone in the evolution of British express passenger locomotives. So, the Paddleboxes, who should make them? Well, given their recent foray into sort of older pre-grouping type locomotives, I'm going to hand this one to Rapido. This is a rather large and intricate model, and I feel like they would handle it quite well. Do let me know in the comments below who you think should be handling each of these builds. And also feel free to drop your suggestions below if there are locomotives you think need to be added to the next list, which I don't know if we'll do. Put your comments in there and I'll see what I can do. Next up, we have another GWR loco. Although I suppose you might argue this is maybe not a GWR loco. In fact, it's quite a French locomotive. And fair warning, I'm probably going to absolutely butcher the pronunciation of some of these, but I'll do my very best. Let's take a look at the GWR La France. GWR 102 La France was an experimental steam locomotive built in 1891. Inspired by the... forgive me, I'm going to butcher these so badly. Inspired by the De Glen compound locomotives running on the Nord Railway in France, Churchwood had La France built in 1903 by Société Alsacienne de Constructions Mécaniques. The locomotive was unique, 4-cylinder compound setup, 2 high-pressure cylinders driving the rear axle and 2 low-pressure cylinders driving the front. This made it a double bogie engine with independent drive mechanisms for each pair of wheels. It also featured a Bel-Paire firebox, which would later become a standard on GWR engines. However, La France struggled in British service. Its complex design led to mechanical issues, particularly with synchronization between the driving axles. It also failed to deliver the expected gains in fuel efficiency or performance. After a meager 14 years of service, La France retired in 1905. Despite its innovative design, it was ultimately not successful, remaining an interesting but short-lived experiment in GWR history. Now, this is a bit of a difficult one because I've got a few manufacturers that I think could potentially tackle the GWR La France. My gut is telling me that Dapple should tackle this one. Dapple generally don't seem to tackle these one-off type locomotives. However, their manners have been a resounding success, and I feel like this is an interesting project for their company. In my mind, I also had someone like a Curascale or perhaps Helgen, but Helgen and steam locomotives don't really seem to fit too well together, do they? Next up, and this is where the video actually tends to just head into the Highlands from here on out, we have the LNER K4 class. Here's a locomotive that is in dire need of a ready-to-run model, so let's take a look at the K4. The LNER K4 class was a series of 260 Mogul locomotives designed by Sir Nigel Gresley for the London North Eastern Railway in 1936. These locomotives were specifically built to handle the steep gradients and sharp curves of the West Highland line in Scotland. a route characterized by challenging terrain and heavy passenger and freight loads. The K4s were developed as a more powerful successor to the older K2s. Gresley equipped them with his signature 3-cylinder arrangement, which provided smoother power delivery and better traction on the demanding Scottish routes. These locomotives were also fitted with large boilers and generous heating surfaces, allowing them to generate sufficient steam for hauling heavy trains over the gradients as steep as 1 in 50. Despite their power and reliability, only 6 K4s were ever built due to the limited needs of the West Highland line. They proved well suited to the route, though, handling express passenger services and mixed freight duties with ease. However, the advent of diesel in the 1950s marked the end of the K4's operational careers, and they were gradually withdrawn from service by the mid-1960s. One K4, number 3442, the Great Marquis, has been preserved. Right, so who tackles the K4? Ooh, there are a couple manufacturers in my mind who could potentially make a really good model of this. First of all, I'm probably going to say Hornby because of their LNER leaning tendencies. Bachmann would do a great job with this too, but I'm actually going to give this to a Curascale this time round. Curascale are yet to sort of tackle a proper LNER locomotive, and this is a very unique one too. So I'm really hoping this is a project they could pick up in the future and make good on, and I have no doubt they absolutely would. I told you this was getting Scottish. Next up, we have the LNER D34, or previously known as the NBR K class. This is a fantastic Scottish locomotive that is yet to be made in ready-to-run format. So let's take a closer look at the Glens. The LNER D34 class, originally known as the NBR's K class, was a series of 440 steam locomotives designed by William P. Reid for the North British Railway in 1913. Known as the Glen due to their names after Scottish glens, these locomotives were built to handle express passenger services, including challenging routes through the Scottish Highlands. The D34s were elegant, featuring a 440 wheel arrangement, a spacious boiler, and superheating for better efficiency. Their inside cylinder drove large coupled wheels, offering smooth and powerful performance. The Glen class excelled at hauling prestigious trains like the Flying Scotsman, known for tackling steep gradients and tight curves in Scotland's rugged terrain. Between 1913 and 1920, 29 locomotives were built, and under the LNER after 1923, they continued to serve, but were eventually overshadowed by newer designs. Despite this, the D34s remained reliable on secondary routes into the 1940s, with some lasting into the British Railways era. One, number 256 Glen Douglas, was preserved and is now on display at the Riverside Museum in Glasgow. Okay, so who's going to tackle the Glens? I'm going to give this one to Bachmann. I feel like their pre-grouping locomotives, which they seem to be dabbling in a lot more lately, would be well suited to something like this. This is perhaps one of the most handsome pre-grouping locomotives in my opinion, but you let me know, do you think Bachmann should handle this? Drop a comment below and let's discuss. Right, here's one that LNER fans have been waiting for quite some time. This is the Thomson A11 Great Northern. This single locomotive has never been produced in ready-to-run format, and I think that's an absolute travesty. Especially from Hornby. I mean, come on guys, you love the LNER. It's time to get Great Northern out the gates and onto the track. I mean, really. Anyways, let's take a look at Great Northern. The LNER Thomson Class A11 Great Northern was a unique and controversial locomotive, rebuilt in 1945 by Edward Thomson, CME of the LNER. Originally a Gresley A1 Pacific, Great Northern was the first of Sir Nigel Gresley's iconic line of Pacific locomotives. Thomson's extensive rebuild sparked debate among railway enthusiasts and historians. Thomson's goal was to standardize LNER locomotive designs and simplify maintenance. While he kept the 462 wheel arrangement, he replaced Gresley's 3-cylinder conjugated valve gear with independent valve gear for each cylinder. He also modified the boiler, added a new cab, and gave the locomotive a more angular look, which made it bulkier and less elegant than its predecessor. In terms of performance, Great Northern was serviceable but not remarkable. It was criticized for heavy coal consumption and a less balanced performance compared to the original A1s. Despite this, it continued to haul express passenger trains until its withdrawal in 1959. The decision to rebuild Great Northern rather than preserve it in its original form remains controversial. Critics argue the modifications ruined its historic value, while supporters view it as a practical solution to post-war challenges. Okay, so this is a no-brainer because I feel like it's their social responsibility to put it together. Hornby, time to make Great Northern. That's it. That's all I have to say about it. Get it done. Okay, now we're getting really Scottish, and I know the next two are Scottish locomotives, so sorry about that for anyone who's south of the border. But this is really important, and I feel like it needs to be made. This is the Caledonian Railway's 439. This might be one of the most beautiful looking tank locomotives I've ever seen, and the fact that it's not in ready-to-run format is an absolute travesty. The Caledonian Railway 439 class was a highly successful series of 044T tank locomotives, designed by John F. McIntosh and introduced in 1900. Built for suburban and branch line passenger services, the 439 became a staple of Scottish railways, praised for its reliability, simplicity, and adaptability. With an 044T wheel arrangement, these locomotives were perfect for navigating sharp curves and frequent stops. Powered by a 2-cylinder engine with Stephenson valve gear and operating at a modest 160 psi boiler pressure, the 439 class wasn't designed for high speeds, but excelled at efficient short-distance passenger work. A total of 92 were built between 1900 and 1925, initially by the Caledonian Railway and later by the LMS after 1923. They were used across Scotland from busy suburban routes around Glasgow to rural branch lines. The 439s remained in service well into British Railways era, with some locomotives operating into the late 1950s and even early 1960s. A testament to their durability and versatility. One member, number 419, has been preserved and is now working at the Bowness and Kinneil Railway. Right, so who should be tackling the Caledonian Railway's 439 class? Tough one, but I'm trying to include as many manufacturers as possible. So this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I'm going to hand it to Helgen. Now I know Helgen haven't had the best success with steam locomotives, but their recent Tango seems to be received quite well lately, so here's hoping they kind of fixed the mechanics of their steam locomotive builds, and they'll be able to put together a fantastic Caledonian Railways tank locomotive. The final locomotive on this list is the Highland Railway's Castle class. Yes, the Highland Railways also had a Castle class Great Western fans, and if I'm completely honest with you, I think this one looks better. Anyways, let's take a look at the Castle class in closer detail. The Highland Railway Castle class was a small fleet of 6 460 steam locomotives, introduced in 1900, designed by David Jones to handle heavy passenger trains on the challenging gradients and curves of the Highland Railway in northern Scotland. The locomotives featured a 460 wheel arrangement, offering a good balance of power and stability for express services. Equipped with inside cylinders, Stephenson valve gear, and relatively large boilers for the time, they were built to handle the steep inclines typical of the region. However, the Castle class faced technical and operational issues, such as insufficient steaming capacity and a light axle load, which limited their ability to haul the heaviest trains. These challenges made them less than successful than other contemporary designs. The class was quickly overshadowed by the more robust Clan class, designed by Peter Drummond, and the Castles were eventually retired by the 1920s. None were preserved, but they are remembered as an early attempt to adapt the 460 configuration to the tough conditions of the Highlands, contributing to the evolution of locomotive design in Scotland. Right, so who should make the Castle class? Given that it is a Jones locomotive, I'm also going to hand it back to Rapido. Now, we haven't seen their Jones goods as yet, but I do feel like it looks incredibly solid. And given that they're heading in this direction, it makes a lot of sense that they continue with the Castle class. I feel like Scotland's railway history just really doesn't get enough attention, to be honest with you. And yes, I am a little bit biased towards the Scottish side of things, but they are deeply underrepresented. So Rapido, you're up. Get us a Castle class. So there you go, chaps. 7 more locomotives that need to be made in ready-to-run format. Now, I know in the previous video, a lot of you pointed out that the pre-grouping locomotives are very underrepresented in the modern ready-to-run format, and I completely agree with that. So I hope this list kind of helps balance things out a little bit more. But if you have further suggestions, drop them in the comments below, and I promise you I'll take a look at them, respond, and see if we can include it in a third video, if we do a third video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Until I see you next time, keep your engines fired and stay on track. All the best.